see you guys in the dark.
Back when I was 14 years old, my family had moved from our home in England to the Republic of Ireland, where we lived for a further 6 years. We had first moved to the northwest of the country, but after a year of living there, we then relocated to the Irish Midlands, as my dad had gotten a new job working in Dublin. My parents had bought a cottage on the outskirts of a very small village that was a stopping point from one of the larger towns to the next. This village was small and remote. There was basically nothing to do. But not long after moving here and taking to exploring the surrounding areas with my border collie, Maisie, I eventually found a large stretch of bogland containing a man-made forest. Every weekend or half term away from school, I took to walking this area with my dog, in which I would follow along a rail line used for transporting peat. However, after months of trekking this very same bogland, I eventually stopped going there. I can't quite recall the reason why, but maybe it was because I always felt as though I was trespassing, or because the bogland was so bumpy and uneven. I always came home with horrific blisters. Although I had stopped going to this bogland to walk my dog, outside one of the nearby towns where I went to school, there was a public forest. Because this forest was a 20-minute drive away, my dad would take me and Maisie there, drop us off, and then pick us up again 2 or 3 hours later. What I loved about those woods was that it was always quiet, only with the occasional family, dog walker, or jogger passing by us. On one particular evening, I had gone back to those woods with Maisie, where my dad would later pick us up after running some errands. Making our way along the trail, the evening had already started to dimmer. Wanting to make my way back to the car before it got too dark, I decided to take a shortcut through the forest, through one of the many narrow side trails. Following down one of these side trails, me and Maisie stumbled upon a small, tippy-shaped hut made from logs. Loving a good game of hide and seek, I would sometimes hide inside this tippy when Maisie wasn't looking, where she would spend the next couple of minutes circling around the hut trying to find me, not realizing she could just go inside. I'm not sure if I played the game with Maisie that day, but following down this exact same side trail, I turned to look behind me, staring down the entryway. I then see a man walking 20 meters behind me, having just taken his side trail. For some unknown reason, I had a strange instant feeling about this man, even though I had only just noticed him. I can't remember or even describe the way this man was walking, but the way he did so felt suspicious to me. Listening to my instincts, or perhaps just my paranoia, I quickly latched my lead onto Maisie and hurriedly made my way down the trail. A few minutes later, although I had reached back onto the main trail, the evening had already turned much darker. Even turning to see if the man was behind me, I could still see him around the corner, only 10 meters away from me now. I did try to tell myself I was just being paranoid, and this man was most likely not following me, but my gut instinct still told me something was off. Thinking ahead, I pull out my phone to call my dad, as I make sure he was already in the car waiting for me, but there was no answer. Because there was no answer, I just assumed he was still probably driving, and because he was still driving, I just hoped that my dad was nearly on his way. By the time I made it back to the car park, it was basically pitch black by now, and there was just one single car in the parking area, but it wasn't my dad's car. Sitting down by a picnic bench to wait for him to come and get us, all I could do was hope that he would be coming soon, that the strange man from the woods was not following me after all. Only a minute or two later, I could hear the footsteps of this very same man approaching through the darkness. Anxiously anticipating him pass by, I tried to distract myself on my phone, or at least make myself seem less approachable. Thankfully enough, the man just walks completely by me, entering the car park. The man then gets into his vehicle, the only car in the parking lot, but he doesn't drive away. He just stays there, sat there inside of his car, with both the engine and headlights turned on. 20 minutes must have gone by, but my dad still wasn't here. And yet this very same stranger was. I was trying to call my dad, text him, to say that I was waiting for him. Still there was no answer. While I continued waiting, I tried to rationalize why this man hadn't decided to drive off. Whatever reasons came with it, they were not very convincing for me. And for those whole 20 minutes or so, however many more minutes, I sat outside those woods in complete darkness, hearing nothing but the hum of this stranger's engine among the silent air night. What made the situation even more anxiety inducing was that my dog Maisie had been endlessly whining at my feet, scraping dirt away beneath the bench to make a surprisingly deep hole. Maisie was in general a very nervous dog, basically whined at everything. But perhaps she too felt as though something about the situation wasn't right. Thankfully, after what felt like far longer than 20 or so minutes, the strange man, already with his engine and headlights on, reverses from his parking spot. He leaves out of the car park and onto the main road, leaving me and Maisie in peace. Although we were now alone, basically stranded outside of the dark forest, I couldn't help but feel a huge sigh of relief come over me. My dad did eventually come and get us, 10 minutes after the man had finally decided to drive off. My dad's excuse for not picking us up on time was that he forgot to pick us up. I really don't know if this man was following me through the forest, and I definitely don't know why he just sat in his car for 20 minutes. But if I had to learn anything from that experience, it would be the following. 1. My dad can be sometimes careless. And 2. Never hike through the forest alone late in the evening. For the past 2.5 years now, I've been living in the north of the Scottish Highlands. And when I say north, I mean as far north as you can possibly go. I live in a small coastal town, which is actually the northernmost town on the British mainland. I had always wanted to live in the Scottish Highlands, which seemed a far cry from my gloomy hometown back in England. And when my dad and his partner told me they'd bought an old house up there, I jumped at the opportunity. From what they told me, this place sounded like the perfect destination. There were seals and otters in the town's river, dolphins and orcas in the sea, and at certain times of the year, you could see the northern lights in the night sky. Despite my initial excitement of finally getting to live in the Scottish Highlands, full of beautiful mountains, amazing wildlife, and vibrant culture, I would soon learn the region I had just moved to was far from the idyllic destination that I had dreamed of. In my spare time, I took to exploring the coastland around the town's area. On one of these days, I started to explore what was the east of the town. On the right-hand side of the mouth of the river, there's an old ruin of a castle, but past that leads to a cliff trail around the eastern coastline. 6 or so months later, into the Christmas season, I'd just gotten out of a long-distance relationship. Feeling as though I'd finally found closure, I decided that I wanted to go on a long hike by myself along the cliff trail. And so, the day after Christmas, Boxing Day, I got my backpack together, packed a lunch for myself, and I headed out at 6 a.m. The hike along the trail had taken me all day, and by the evening I had walked so far that I actually discovered what I first thought was a ghost town. What I found was an abandoned port settlement, which had the creepiest looking disperse of old stone houses, as well as what looks like the ruins of an ancient round tower. As it turned out, this was actually a heritage center, a tourist spot. It seemed I had walked so far around the rugged terrain that I was almost now 10 miles outside of my town. On the other side of this settlement were very high, distant cliffs, which compared to the cliffs I had already trekked along, were far grander. Although I could feel my legs finally begin to give away, I already anticipated a long journey back along the trail. I decided that I was going to cross the bay and reach the cliffs, and then make my way back home. By the time I was making my way around the bay, it had become very dark. I had already walked past more than half of the bay, but the cliffs didn't feel any closer. It was at this point when I decided I really needed to turn around, as at night walking back along the cliff trail was going to be dangerous, and for the parts of the trail that led down to the base of the cliffs, I really couldn't afford for the tide to cut off my route. I made my way back through the abandoned settlement of the Heritage Center, and at night this place definitely felt more like a ghost town. Shining my phone flashlight in the windows of the old stone houses, I was expecting to see a face or something peer out at me. What surprisingly made these houses scarier at night was a handful of old fishing boats that had been left outside of them. The wood they were made from looked very old, and the paint had mostly been weathered off. But what was more concerning was that in this abandoned ghost town of a settlement, I wasn't alone. A van had pulled up, and 3 or 4 young men getting out. I wasn't sure what they were doing exactly, but they were burning things into a trash bin. What it was that they were burning, I really don't know. But as I made my way out of the abandoned settlement, every time I looked back at the men by the van, at least one of them was watching me. Already feeling scared of the creepy surroundings, I now felt very unsafe because of these men, staring suspiciously at me. I was paranoid that they were going to try and follow me, as if I had caught them doing something illegal. Thankfully, they stayed where they were, as I continued to make my way out of the ghost town and back along the trail. I'm currently visiting my grandmother, and she lives in a small town, just a couple hundred people live in it. I do small hikes daily here. We used to do them together, but because of the sunny weather today, she decided to stay home. Everything was going as usual, and I decided to do a small hike along this little path, right through the woods that my grandmother had recommended to me. I also like to use these short moments alone to smoke a little, enjoying the landscape, so I smoke. After about an hour and a half of walking, something happened. I saw a man who was about 60 meters away from me walking in my direction. Everything still seemed normal at this point. As he came closer, I noticed him really staring at me. As I awkwardly broke and re entered eye contact, the closer he came, the more tense I felt. As I walked past him, I noticed a strange grin on his face. He had really bad teeth and was quite tall. He walked in a way that really unsettled me. It was kind of awkward. I decided to break the silence, and I said hello. He didn't answer right away, but I could hear a very silent mumbling as he passed by me. I don't really know how to describe this, but I felt like something was off about him. I could just tell. I felt him looking at me after we were about 10 meters away from each other, so I turned around, and I absolutely caught him staring at me, and not even walking, just standing there. He quickly turned around as if he didn't want me to notice that he was still watching me. I'd smoked a J about 20 minutes earlier, so this all really freaked me out. I tried to put it aside as paranoia from the weed. After about 20 minutes of following the trail, I noticed that I was walking into a dead end because I previously took a wrong turn, so I had to turn around the exact way that the strange man went earlier. I decided to pull myself together and distract myself with some music as I headed back, but I just couldn't get that previous encounter and the fact that I had to go in his direction again out of my head. I kept walking for about 40 minutes. At this point, I thought to myself that the chances of meeting him again were very slim, and that I should just focus on getting home. As I began feeling very tired from the constant sun, I also had this thought: no one would ever find me here, which is a very scary concept in my opinion. I was making progress, but then I saw someone sitting on a small bench right next to the path. It was him. I felt like I was in a goddamn horror movie. Thoughts rushed through my head. Did he wait here for me? Did he know about the dead end and knew that I still had to head back? I was kind of panicking, and I decided just to keep my cool. The bench was placed in a way that he could not see me yet, but would have a perfect look at me facing my back when I would walk past him. So I came closer. My heart began to beat in a way it hadn't in years, the kind like you just ran a marathon and came through the finish line. I was freaking out. As I came closer, he noticed me and began looking at me over his shoulder. And there it was again, that same grin he gave me earlier. I had goosebumps. I kept walking in a normal place and didn't go a second without looking behind me as I walked past. He kept staring in a strange way. He was just so creepy, and I had this fear that he would suddenly get up and chase me. After he kept looking right into my soul, I started slowly jogging, which turned into a sprint. I ran as quickly as I could until I could not see him anymore. Going home, I could not get all of this out of my head. This really startled me. There really was something not right with him. I could just sense it. I've never felt this way about anyone I've ever met. When I was about 23, my friend Emily was using Tinder and matched with a guy. She sent him a photo of me, and he told her his friend was interested. Before I knew it, we were planning a double date. Their idea of a first hangout was a hike. The guys picked us up and drove us to a desert like trail where we could see the city and neighborhoods from far off. I already felt a little uneasy, but I hadn't promised anything. I was just going along for the ride. We started climbing higher up the trail. At some point, Emily and her date walked ahead, turned a corner, and disappeared down the hill. That left me alone with him. The second they were out of sight, I felt his arm wrap around me. Something pressed against my neck. I looked down. I realized it was a pocket knife. I let out a nervous laugh, probably pure shock. He was actually grinning and said, "You laughed. You're my kind of girl." Then he slipped the knife back into his pocket and kept his arm around me like nothing had happened. I tried to move forward quickly and get through the rest of the hike. Afterwards, they brought us back to his family's house. Apparently, they were really wealthy. I left my sweatshirt there by accident. Later, he sent a picture of it to Emily, saying I'd get it back next time I came over. There was no next time. I never saw this guy again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.